Welcome back, bread friends. Here's Ellen, your crazy baker chick, and today I'm doing a gluten-free recipe for cinnamon rolls. I created this recipe maybe just 4 or 5 days ago. I was honestly shocked that it worked. I didn't know if it would, but it did. And I took it to my friend Kathy for final approval, and she's like, "Oh, Ellen." I mean, her eyes rolled back in her head. She was just, it was really funny. These are gluten-free, but they are not wheat-free because the flour that I use is this Caputo gluten-free, or it's called Fiore Glute in Italian. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I probably am not. And all gluten-free flours are a mix of different flours. And in the recipe below, I will list the ingredients of the Caputo flour for you so you can double check to make sure it's okay with you. Now, people eat gluten-free, as if you're watching this, you probably know, but people eat gluten-free diets for many different reasons. If you are baking for yourself and you have celiac and you have used your bread machine for non-gluten-free recipes, you might want to get a dedicated bread machine for gluten-free baking because any trace could make you have a reaction, obviously. The 3 people in my life that eat gluten-free do not have celiac. They just have a gluten intolerance. It causes, whether it's gastrointestinal issues, or one friend gets splotches on her face, another one has I think gastrointestinal also makes her feel just horrible. So they are okay if there is the itty bitty tiniest cross-contamination, which my bread pan is very, very clean, but it could be. Just like I would never allow anyone to use my bread machines to bake anything with nuts because I'm allergic to nuts. I would not do it. So if you are baking for someone else who eats gluten-free, but you have baked recipes that have gluten in them, please make sure that they will not be hurt by a tiny bit of cross-contamination, just in case. That's my public service announcement, but it's very important because you don't want to bake something for someone only to have them get sick on it, obviously. Gluten-free baking is very, very tricky, and if you've tried before, you know. I have tried 3 or 4 bread machine cinnamon rolls recipes to bake for my friend Kathy, and she has come over and had to eat them with a spoon, which she said at least it tasted good, but it did not really make any kind of a dough that you could roll out and really make cinnamon rolls. My recipe will. So, yay! So I have measured out all my ingredients. I'm going to tell you what the ingredients are, but I'm not going to give you the measurements right now because they will be below. And let me tell you exactly where that is. When you are watching this video on YouTube, there's the video screen right here. Just below, there should be a description, and you usually have to find the word in bold that says more. And when you click that more button, there will be right away, almost at the very top of my description, a direct link to the PDF of this recipe. 1 click. So you watch the video, you go down to more, find the description. You don't have to read anything else really, but click that link. It will take you to my website. Open the PDF. You don't have to look for it on my website. You don't have to do a search, nothing. Click that link and you will be at a beautiful PDF recipe, and you'll be able to download it to your computer, or you'll be able to just look at it, or you will be able to print it right from there. It's a direct link, super easy. I've just done that recently and it's a lot easier for everybody. Okay, so the ingredients are half and half, which is half milk, half cream. I'm sure you can probably use whole fat milk, but I use this because honestly it's what I always have in the house because my husband uses it in his coffee. Okay, if you live in Europe or somewhere else that doesn't have this product, just use the highest fat content milk that you can. I have not tried this recipe with a non-dairy milk like almond milk or oat milk or soy milk or anything like that. If you cannot have dairy, and there's also butter in the recipe, if you cannot have dairy, this recipe might not be for you, but you can always use more oil instead of butter. You can try that. I have not tried it. And you can try another one of those vegan or non-dairy, plant-based, whatever you need to use. You can try it in this recipe, but I have not tried it. Okay, so all of those things taken care of. The ingredients are half and half, like I just showed you, which is half milk, half cream. It has grapeseed oil. You do not have to have exactly grapeseed oil. You can use any neutral oil. Neutral meaning it doesn't have a flavor, a strong flavor, because you don't want olive oil and cinnamon rolls, because that would be a strange combination of cinnamon, sugar, butter, and olive. No, you don't want that. Some people use avocado oil. You can use vegetable oil. You can use whatever canola oil is. You can use that as long as it does not have a strong flavor. Some people even use light olive oil. I have not tried it. I only have regular, nice, strong olive oil. So, half and half grapeseed oil, apple cider vinegar, or you can use lemon juice, I think. I haven't tried it. Honey. This specific flour, it has to be this gluten-free flour. Caputo brand, Fiore Glute, gluten-free flour. Sugar, just regular table sugar, granulated sugar. Salt, just regular old table salt. Butter, I use salted in this recipe. And the gold label of SAF instant yeast, because that is created for sweeter doughs, and this is a sweeter dough because it has 30 grams of honey and 30 grams of sugar, so that's 60 grams, and I use it for any dough that has 40 plus grams of sugar of some kind. So I'm not going to keep this video going right now. I'm going to get the ingredients into the bread pan, and what I'm going to do, and this is very different, I'm not using the gluten-free setting. I'm going to actually use my dough setting. And all I'm going to have the bread machine do is the rest in my house, in my Zoe Girushi Virtuoso Plus, is 23 minutes. At about 5 minutes, I'm going to check the dough to make sure it's not too wet or too dry. And that's different for gluten-free also, because other gluten-free recipes I made have been more like a cake batter. This is actually a dough. As soon as it stops kneading, I'm taking it out of the bread machine. I am not going to allow the bread machine to do any rises. No proofing with this dough. Well, not no proofing, but no proofing in the bread machine. So I'm going to have it knead. That's it. So in my machine, that will take, I don't know, it's somewhere between 40 and 50 minutes, I think. But I'm going to use my iPad over there as a stopwatch to make sure. I am going to set a timer on my watch for 28 minutes. That's 23 minutes of rest plus 5 minutes of kneading to check it. And then usually about 9 minutes later is the ad beep, and then it goes for about 5 to 10 more minutes. I'm not really sure. I've never timed it. I just kind of listen for it. So all I'm going to use the bread machine for is kneading. That's it. Then I'm going to take it out. We're going to roll out the cinnamon rolls, and we'll show you how all that looks. I have put all my wet ingredients into the bread machine. Put the flour, the gluten-free flour over. And then I always put sugar way far on the right. There's the sugar right there. I put the salt, way over on the left. And the butter goes along the sides. Sorry, I'm doing this part myself. My husband already left the room. And then finally, I make a little well right there. And that is where the yeast goes. It has its own little hole to sit in. I'm going to go to the bread machine, and I'm going to choose course 11 on the Zoe Virtuoso Plus. So for this recipe, you don't even have to have a gluten-free cycle on your bread machine. Isn't that exciting? As I pressed the start button, I started the stopwatch on my iPad. So I will stop the iPad as soon as the dough cycle has needed, and I think I better plug my iPad in. Because my bread machine has a rest at the beginning, I don't know if you can, there we go, read the word rest. That means that for the first 23 minutes in my kitchen, because my kitchen isn't probably maybe as cold as yours in the winter, but in my kitchen, it's about 23 minutes of rest, and that pre-warms the ingredients. So in my machine, I don't have to warm the liquid or soften the butter, or take the yeast or eggs or whatever is in the machine, recipe out early to come to room temperature or be warm. But if you do not have a rest, you are going to have to warm your liquids, soften your butters, leave your eggs out if they're not, this recipe doesn't have egg, but you get the idea. So in your machine, if you don't do all of that and you have to warm your liquid, you're only probably looking at about, I don't know, half an hour, and then your dough is ready to roll out. I don't know exactly, but, and if I know a friend of mine has 2 dough settings. One is called leaven, I think, and one isn't. So I think the one that isn't is the one that would be perfect for this, because you would just knead the dough and it would be done and you take it out. Leaven would mean that it goes through the rises. I believe that's what it's called. I don't have that bread machine. I've only seen that once. So because obviously we are making cinnamon rolls, I'm going to have to make some cinnamon sugar. I usually don't measure the sugar or the cinnamon, but I did measure the sugar. The sugar is 130 grams, and that will be in the recipe. The cinnamon, I would say, is probably, I'm guessing, about 4 to 6 grams, but I really hesitate to give you an exact amount, and the reason is everybody's tastes are different. Some people like a really, really potent cinnamon, and some people want to be backed off. So what you need to do is put your sugar in, put some cinnamon in, mix it up, take a little spoon, a clean spoon, and taste it and see if you feel that it's the right mixture for you. I don't know what your taste buds are. This is like, how much salt should you put on a steak? Come on, I mean, it's a per person thing. So this is what I'm starting with, and then I will taste it. And you know what? If I've made it with too much cinnamon, what can I do? I can add more sugar. Not a crime. I have mixed that up and tasted it, and it's nice and strong and cinnamony for me. Maybe too much for you. Make sure you mix it really, really, really well. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to show you is the butter for spreading on the dough. You can use any salted butter that you like, but I choose Kerrygold. Now, I don't put this in the dough because the butter blends in with the dough, and it's not so important to have this extra special butter mixed into the dough, but the butter and cinnamon sugar part, that you can really taste. And so I go for the good stuff, especially when I'm going to gift this to a close friend or family member. So I love the Kerrygold Pure Irish Butter. This is what we put on our toast. This is what we put on our veggies if we want some butter on our veggies once in a while. This butter is so good. So what I'm going to do is unwrap the brick, cut it apart a bit, and just put it in kind of a small bowl to soften. I don't even need to microwave it, I don't think. By the time I'm going to use it, which is probably a good 45 minutes from now, it should be soft. And if it's not, then I'll nuke it for 10 seconds and it'll be just great. Obviously, I'm not going to nuke it in the wrapper because this is metallic. So get yourself a good butter when you're making cinnamon rolls, just for the spreading part. Just a hair past 28 minutes, and we're going to take a look at the dough. I should actually turn the timer off on my watch, but I'm not going to now because I have to put down the camera. So you can see that, considering that it's gluten-free, it's a pretty decent smooth dough ball. It does feel, it's not tacky. Well, a little bit tacky, it's sticky, but it's pretty good. I don't think I'm going to add anything. I had already made it once before and modified. Sorry about the watch timer, but I don't want to stop to turn it off. Anyway, this dough looks good. I'm going to let it go until the kneading stops. And I do have that stopwatch running, which I'll show you. Oops. So we're at 30 minutes, and I will listen for the kneading to stop. I did forget to tell you that I took a little silicone skinny scraper and just went around the edges because there was some stuff sticking. And before the 5-minute mark, my husband looked in, he goes, "Honey, you better look at this dough because it's not coming together." And I look at him and I go, "Wait for it." And by the 5-minute mark, it had, and now look at it now. It is perfect. And this is at 31 minutes. But that was 23 minutes of rest, remember. Of course, you always want to be prepared ahead of time. You don't want to be scrambling after your dough is done. So I wiped my island down and I sprinkled some of my gluten-free flour. Make sure you don't have any other flour nearby where you could take that by mistake, because that would really defeat the purpose of gluten-free. And I have my softening butter. It's pretty soft. It should spread, and by the time this is done, I have my cinnamon sugar mixture, my rolling pin, bench scraper, my flour, and the last thing I need to get out is a container, some kind of a casserole pan or whatever to bake this in. If I'm going to serve these, like have guests over and serve them right away, I would probably not bake them in this foil pan. But as it happens, I'm going to give these to somebody, so I want them to be in there. So what I'm going to do is use my nonstick spray, canola oil spray from Costco. And I am going to spray it really well. And I'm actually thinking about putting parchment in it then, so I can lift them out on the rack to cool, but then also they will be easier to wrap up if they are not in the pan. Because I'm going to put these in the freezer and then deliver them to one of my cousins later. You do you. 37 minutes have passed. Well, a little more than 37 minutes have passed since I started the rest plus the kneading. So I think, I've never timed it precisely before, but that's why I'm doing this now. I think it will be in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm just kind of hanging out in the kitchen and not watching TV because I don't want to miss it. The ad beep has just started to go off, and it started right at about 39 minutes. That's what I have written down right there. And so after the ad beep, it's not too much longer before the kneading stops and we'll take the dough out. But we're gonna know for sure. Oh, thought it was done. It's not. It's almost done kneading though, because there's a change in the kneading. What it looks like. All right, I was sitting here with my thumb over the stop and start button of the stopwatch. The bread machine stopped kneading and I pressed this button. So 44.5 minutes-ish, approximately. Maybe it went off at, no, it went off probably right around 44 minutes, approximately. But anyway, you get the idea. As far as setting your timer, set it a little early so you know you're in the kitchen just in case. And that is the time. And all that was is rest for 23 minutes, and the rest was kneading. And that's all we need. So I'm going to cancel, because see, it says rise now. I don't want it to rise. Cancel, unplug. Then I'm going to call my videographer back in, and I'll roll it out in front of you. So as you know from the last scene, the dough is ready. The butter is softened nicely. I'm just kind of, you know, getting it ready to be spread. All right, I'm gonna dump out the dough. Plunk. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that I take the paddles out right away. And I put a little dish soap in and put some water in it. And this isn't hot, like when you bake bread in it, obviously, because the dough course doesn't, it makes it slightly warm, and that's all. You just need water so that it covers the spindles where the paddles were. So, dry off my hands. And there we go. You know, when I make regular, not gluten-free, regular dough, it's yellowish, and this is really, look at how white it is in comparison. So what I'm going to do is just kind of coat it with dough a little bit. I may need more flour on there, but we'll see. Oops. It is fragile, so just gonna pat and see how it does kind of crack. You can see the little, I don't know what else to call them, but cracks. But but it's also kind of greasy. Like you can see my hands are shiny. Can you see that? So I'm just gonna start rolling. And it's a different feeling when you roll this. I thought that was a hair for a minute. It's the logo. So it's a little more delicate. I'm just going to roll. Every time I say I'm rolling, I think of the scene from Young Frankenstein where Terry Gower says, roll, roll, roll in the hay. If you haven't seen the movie Young Frankenstein, it's like from the 70s, and it's absolutely hysterical. And it's one of our favorites. So I'm almost done. I don't want any fat parts. Not that there's anything wrong with fat, but I don't want it right now in this dough because I want it to be fairly even. And if it was easy to pick this dough up and move it out that way, I would, but it will break. So I'm not going to do that. But what I can do is cut this off and put it over here. Sorry for the loud noise of throwing my bench scraper down. Again, the dough isn't necessarily hard to handle, but it is sort of more fragile. But I have never even been able to make a gluten-free recipe that actually became dough before. It shocked me, to be honest. I didn't know that would happen. It was a pleasant surprise. You can see I'm kind of patching. You may have done this with, if you've made your own pie crust before, because I rolled it out a little thin over here. So it takes maybe a little more TLC. It's not too bad. And actually the thin parts probably won't even show when you roll it up. Okay. So I'm going to just wash my hands because they're greasy. And then I'm going to slather butter on and probably get more greasy, but oh well. It's just what I need to do. My mom told me when I was a little kid that I drove her crazy wanting her to constantly, like when I was 2 or 3, I'd play in the sandbox. I'd get my hands all sandy, muddy, whatever. And then I would bug her to wash my hands. Then I'd go back in the sandbox and get them like that, but I couldn't stand the feeling of the dirty hands. So I'd be constantly running back, Mom, help me wash my hands again. Drove her kind of crazy, I think. Don't like the feel of gook on my hands. So if you've ever made cinnamon rolls before, this part will not be unfamiliar to you. You just kind of slather. I love that word. You may have heard me use that word before. Slather on the butter. Do have to be a little more careful with this dough. In fact, I'm going to get one of my frosting spreaders after I do this, because this is just a little more challenging with this dough because it's easily ripped. But it's definitely worth the effort. So let me just grab another little tool. This I think I did this when I made it before. This is a frosting spreader, so it has that angle to it. So we're gonna turn off the camera. You don't have to watch me spread every little bit of the butter on here, but we'll start again when I do the cinnamon. So my videographer saw me playing with this tool and says, "Can I do it? Can I try that?" And of course, he always has a better way. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. No, he's better at a lot of things than I am. That's his way of saying yes, I am. But we have a joke. We have a joke between us if I'm trying to do something and he gets frustrated because he knows he can do it better. So it's a just move over and let me do it. It's our kind of our husband and wife joke, sort of a joke. But at least I try. I'm not good at things as a lot of things that he is good at. So, but that's okay. I'm better at other things. All right. So I think this next part is pretty obvious. You know, I always make my cinnamon and sugar mixture with cinnamon and granulated regular old white sugar. And I know a lot of you use brown sugar, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it had never even occurred to me to use brown sugar. And one time someone asked me, "Why do you use white sugar and not brown sugar?" I'm like, "I don't know." And so I tried brown sugar once, and I asked the fam, "Is it better with brown sugar?" And they were like, kind of okay, good, delicious either way. Doesn't really make much of a difference. And I've just kept it at the white sugar because mixing the white sugar with the cinnamon, because they're both a fine, well, the cinnamon obviously is a powder and the granulate is it, but brown sugar can be, you know, lumpy and bumpy and that kind of thing. So I think it's easier to mix the cinnamon into the sugar, although I guess I could sprinkle on the brown sugar and then sprinkle on the cinnamon and not have it pre-made. So you know what? It matters not. You do what you like. That was the moral of the story. All right. So I am going to I'm just making sure I can lift this. Kind of like pie crust. It is, as I said, slightly more difficult to handle. Not a lot. You're not going to be going, "Oh, this is driving me crazy." That's not going to happen. It's not that bad. Excuse me, I have to cough. Don't want to cough on the dough. So I'm just rolling. Roll in the hay. And I am going, you see it's started sticking over here. So just being really careful. All right, I'm just gonna pick this up, just kind of, and I'm gonna flip it and try to seal the bottom. And again, the dough is delicate. I don't know if you can see where I ripped it right there, but it's okay. It's not really gonna matter too much because, and there, see, it cracks. So just be gentle. Be gentle. I'm going to use my bench scraper and I'm just going to cut in half and then in half again. Oh, I better flour this. I don't think I had to do that before. Interesting. Or maybe I'll just sprinkle flour over the whole thing. That might make it easier. Okay. Then in half again. Sorry, buddy. And then I'm just going to pop it in here. I should have 8 rolls. And that one's a little bigger. Oh well. I've never been known for my skills with fractions and cutting things evenly, but it doesn't matter. So after I place this in here, I will kind of rearrange a bit to give them space above, below, and on all the sides to rise. And rise they will. Let me just rinse my hands off for a minute. Again, with the greasy hands, but I don't really want to touch things with greasy hands, touch things in my kitchen. So we're going to walk over to the oven right now. And if you've watched my non-gluten-free recipes, you'll know that I always do a rise the same way. I want to bake these on the middle rack. Not baking yet, but I'm just getting the oven ready. So I want my oven to only be slightly warmed. Slightly warmed. And I put it to rise in here. So I'm going to turn my oven on to bake. And the lowest temperature I have is 170. I'm going to start the oven. And then set the timer for 1 minute. In that 1 minute, my oven will slightly warm, but when the 1 minute is over, the oven gets turned off. Please do not keep your oven on. Only heat it for 1 minute. If you've watched my other videos, you've heard me talk about this ad nauseum. And I'm sorry about that, but every video has to stand alone and teach people how to do things. If you have a proof setting on your oven, it should proof at about 85 degrees. So just turn on proof, set a timer for usually 40 to 45 minutes. But in this case, I'm going to let these rise for an entire hour because the gluten-free only has 1 rise and it needs to be a little bit longer. So we have 13 seconds left. When the timer goes off, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to turn the oven off. Please make sure you don't leave the room. It's only 1 minute. There we go. Timer off, oven off. Do not leave the oven on. So I'm going to pop the cinnamon rolls in. If I touched the element, it would definitely be hot, but it's not. If I stick my hand in here, it just feels warm, but not super hot. And I'm going to set a timer for 1 hour. How do I do 1 hour? Just 1, 0, 0. I usually don't do that. Start. There we go. And I'm also going to turn on this obnoxious loud one because sometimes if I'm watching TV or out of the room, I might not hear the oven one because it's just one little beep. I'm sorry, it's really obnoxious. I know I'm almost there. There we go. Because that's a really loud, obnoxious timer, and even if I'm back in the back of the house, I will hear it. So we're going to let these rise for 1 hour. We're going to bake them, and they will be delicious. There's 12.5 minutes left, and you can see that they've definitely risen because they're all stuck together and not spaced out anymore. Since we only have 8 minutes and 50 seconds left before they're done rising, I'm going to show you how I make egg wash. Trust me, this is not rocket science. Crack 1 egg. Hope I don't get any shell in there. And then I do not measure this amount of water. It's somewhere around a teaspoon, a tablespoon. I just turned on the faucet for a second, turned it back off. I'm not even going to use all of that. Just going to put about that much. It's not crucial. And then, I mean, I could use a fork to beat this and it might be slightly easier, but why dirty two things? Since I'm gonna use this brush to brush it on the cinnamon rolls, might as well use the brush to beat the egg. And we are there. So I'm just going to leave this here. I'm just gonna put this in the fridge because it is egg, but it's only for now 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Then I'll show you how I egg wash. It's time to egg wash. These have definitely doubled in size. I just turned the oven on to preheat to 350 degrees, and I'm just going to egg wash. Egg wash is optional if you are allergic to egg or frankly don't want to bother, because it is, you don't use a whole egg and it maybe can be a little bit wasteful, but it does give breads a beautiful little sheen, golden brown appearance. Doesn't really do much about the flavor. See that one big one that I cut extra big? Oh well, doesn't hurt anything. So I am egg washing these, and when the oven has heated all the way to 350, I will pop them in. And first I will set a timer for 30 minutes, and this is, or 20 minutes rather for these. It's a really standard thing. I set it for a time that I know will not be done, but I don't like things to over brown. And your breads can look baked at that 25 or 30 minutes because they're brown on top, but they're not. Oh, look, I've actually used almost the whole egg. I don't feel too guilty. And this is egg with that little splash of water. So that is about all there is to do until the oven has heated up. So you can see that gluten-free dough looks a little different. It's kind of, I don't even know what to call it, bumpy. It cracks a little bit, but I did make this before. I did taste it. I took it to my friend Kathy. She was over the moon. They are truly delicious. Yes, they are still gluten-free. If you made these for someone who didn't need gluten-free and they weren't used to the flavor, they'd kind of go, these taste kind of weird. Gluten-free is never going to taste like quote-unquote regular. It never will. But we have to do the best we can for people who need the gluten-free, you know, for medical reasons. So this is what we do. I want you to know that there are lots of other recipes on my website, and I will be adding more gluten-free recipes in the months to come. They are a little more difficult to develop. I'm really good at developing quote-unquote normal recipes. Gluten-free is new for me. I'm doing my best. This is my first one, and I have a bread ready to go that we'll do a video soon. But I will be developing lots of gluten-free recipes, and I will also be trying to make them, some of them dairy, animal product free. Not all of them, but I will try very hard to get that done for you as well, for those of you who can't have dairy or egg. My website is ellensbreadmachinerecipes.com. That's Ellens, E-L-L-E-N-S. You have to pretend there's an apostrophe there, but don't put the apostrophe in after the N before the S, because you can't put that in the URL on the computer. ellensbreadmachinerecipes.com. There you go. We'll see what these look like in about 20 minutes after the oven is heated. I'll put them in, and then I might have to tent them with foil to make sure they don't over brown before they're done. All right, it's been 20 minutes. I'm sure they're not all the way cooked yet, but just want to check. All right, gluten-free doesn't get brown as fast. I know these are not done, so I'm just gonna close the oven and set a timer for 10 more minutes and give it another check. At about 10 more minutes, they are browning, but not quite brown enough. So I'm gonna let them brown another 5 minutes take their temperature once again. They are nowhere near 200 degrees. Sorry, that was the 40-minute mark. So I'm gonna set another 5 and then probably temp them, but they're not gonna be cooked yet, just getting over brown, so I'm gonna put that foil on. They are nice and brown now, so I'm gonna pop that piece of foil. I cannot do it safely while holding the video camera, but I'll show you what it looks like. As you can see, I just laid that on there, and I'm gonna close the oven. And the temp was at 175. I want it to be 200. So I'm gonna check it again in 5 minutes and we hopefully will be there. I keep forgetting to mention that I had a skin cancer removed and I have steri strips on there right now. They are supposed to be able to come off, well, they start to fall off in about a week from a couple of days ago. So maybe the next 4 to 7 days, I'll be able to take it off. I will have a scar. I will put scar away on it. I'll be able to put makeup on it maybe, but if you were wondering, that's what that is, because it was probably bugging you. It would bug me. I'm like, turn. So there are the already baked cinnamon rolls. I think it took about 50 minutes all told, but you can't depend on that. You have to watch it, make sure it doesn't get too brown. Pop that foil over it while it's still in the oven like I did before. And don't take them out until they're 200 degrees by using an instant read thermometer that looks kind of like this and has a probe. And you do the probe like that. All right, so now I'm going to quickly make a little glaze. Luckily, powdered sugar has no gluten. Yes, I know I'm messy, but powdered sugar is floofy. It's floofy, not fluffy, but floofy. I gotta get the milk, a half and half rather. I'm gonna put in a splash of vanilla. No, I don't measure it. That was maybe half a teaspoon, I don't know. And little bit, maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons full. I like to use this mini whisk. A big whisk, I think maybe would be a little big. I don't know. It's just a personal choice. You could probably even just use a fork. I don't know. You know how we like certain things in our kitchen for doing certain things. And I try to get all the lumps out. But don't worry, it's not like pancakes where you'd have an icky lump. The lump would just simply be sugar, so. And I made it thicker like my husband prefers. And I'm just gonna, oops. Ziggy-zaggy. And voila. And there it is. Throw this in the sink. There are the glazed cinnamon rolls, and I have a plate here. If it was bread, I would say don't cut it for 2 to 3 hours until it cools on a rack. But come on, I'm not slicing these. They're already, you know, ready. So I'm going to pick this one right here. And I'm going to get it out of there. And it is obviously piping hot. I'm gonna well, I guess I might as well just use my fingers. Let's see if I have to let it cool before touching it. I'm kind of sensitive to heat. All right, I'm just gonna pull this apart so you can kind of see how nice. See how the butter and the cinnamon sugar, see how it's all nice and ooey gooey? What we want is ooey gooey cinnamon rolls, and we shouldn't have to give them up even though we eat gluten-free, right everybody? So I'm gonna take a little taste right here. I do not have to eat gluten-free, but I will taste it anyway. That's even better than what I made last time, because last time I forgot to use the Kerrygold butter. This time, I'm telling you, the Kerrygold butter for the spread, not necessarily in the dough baking, but for the spread, Kerrygold makes all the difference in the world. It just has a richer flavor. I am going to eat this with delight. So, more gluten-free recipes to come, but this is the first one I've created for you. Hope you enjoy it. Go to my website, look at some other recipes if you don't have to keep gluten-free for everybody. There's lots and lots of stuff on my website, and more gluten-free recipes to come. ellensbreadmachinerecipes.com, and there will be a link below in the description of this video. Thank you for watching.